and improves the lives of all working people. Sidzu Usmasi.
Thank you very much, Governor Guerrero, for your testimony. And of course, now I will recognize my governor, Governor Rafty Guerrero Torres, for his 5 minutes of testimony. Governor, please.
Honorable Chairman Grajava, Vice Chairman Garcia, and Chairman Congressman Kilili, members of the House Committee on Natural Resources, thank you for inviting my testimony on behalf of the people of the CNMI on President Biden's Build Back Better initiative. I will highlight some of the key points we submitted written testimony. In 1986, our new Commonwealth government found itself confronted with the challenge of modernizing an over 50-year-old pre-World War II infrastructure, road and water system, unreliable power generation, a hospital facility in deplorable condition, environmentally hazardous wastewater and solid waste dump condition, and ports that require significant upgrading were at the top of the list. While substantial progress has been made, we have struggled to secure funding resources necessary to address the breadth of our infrastructure needs. Crucial infrastructure systems on Saipan, Tinian, and Rota are critically outdated, at capacity, or in need of substantial maintenance. Dedicating funding resources for infrastructure is critical, but is not only the step needed. This committee is familiar with the CNMI struggle to support the demands of our economy with the present workforce. A lack of construction workers has proved a significant barrier to advancing our community. As the nation works to build back better, we must address the unique capacity and infrastructure challenges of the U.S. territories and realize a solution that provides immediate and long-lasting relief. With only 2,800 individuals currently employed in construction, our ability to address essential development is severely limited. One project alone, the Air Force Tinian Divert Airfield, may require as many as 2,099 construction workers. That's 75% of our total construction workforce. These increased demands have rapidly driven up and will continue to drive up costs associated with construction, reducing the efficacy of federal infrastructure dollars. Between 2019 and 2020, wages associated with construction occupation increased by 26.3%, far in excess of federal minimum wage standards and in line with prevailing wages across occupation, clearly a result of the shortage of labor available. I ask that this effort consider both our needs for greater level of investment and the means by which we can adequately utilize this investment to break ground and complete projects. In 2020, Congress approved 3,000 CW-1 visa work for foreign workers engaged in construction connected to recovery efforts from declared disasters. I would submit that the state of CNMI's infrastructure constitute an emergency and that this apportionment be applied to permit the 3,000 CW visa allotment to all construction activities to support public and private investment throughout the CNMI. In the spirit of fulfilling Section 701 of the Covenant, the federal government provided CIP funds to support the goal of modern infrastructure. This program aided the Commonwealth in phenomenal advancement, but the structure of the program has not kept pace with the increased cost of infrastructure. The CIP fund has been locked at $27 million since the program incepted in 1978. We urge the review of an increase in the budget amount to adjust the inflationary cost and current infrastructure needs. Access to capital markets to provide financing to support large-scale investment is critically important. A just CIP allotment can provide adequate security for public debt that can support rapid advancement for our infrastructure. The people of the CNMI are deserving of a modern, sustainable infrastructure that supports economic development, a better quality of life, and a healthy environment. The Build Back Better initiative is an opportunity to address many of the long-standing concerns of the CNMI that are specific to our ability to better manage our economic development and make real investment in the infrastructure of the CNMI and the life of its people. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on Build Back Better infrastructure initiative. Congressman Kilili, I personally want to thank you for all the hard work you have put in bringing funds that we need here in the CNMI. And I am in full support of this landmark initiative, and I look forward working with you and the administration of President Biden to see its full implementation. Again, undang tu nasusumasi para todo lazudumo. And
Yes,
susumasi.
sir. Yeah, thank you, Governor Torres. I just realized that actually we could have joined together for this. I know you're just 3-4 miles up the hill, and we should have come together where that helps. But maybe at a future hearing. Thank you very much, Governor Torres. Let me go back to my panelists. I think the next governor is the governor of American Samoa, Governor. Let me see, Governor Malga, please. You have 5 minutes, sir. Good morning.
Honorable Chairman Kavala, Vice Chairman Saplan, and distinguished members of the Full Committee on Insular Affairs. Talofa and good morning from American Samoa. I'm humbled by the opportunity you have given me to share with you how U.S. territories like American Samoa can benefit from the Biden administration's Build Back Better plan. We must acknowledge the help and support of the honorable members of this committee through congressional legislation, Department of the Interior, and its Office of Insular Affairs. We thank you for your commitment to the insular areas in the full committee, as well as other subcommittees in providing guidance in the areas of ocean fisheries, national.
As we recently celebrated our 100th anniversary of being an American territory, you can ensure that we are prepared for the next 100 years, strengthening our infrastructure and eliminating federal policies that undermine our ability to attract investment that would give us a fighting chance to make our second century as Americans even better than the first. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you. Thank you, Governor Brian. Thank you very much for your testimony. I would like to now recognize the chair of the full committee, Chairman Grijalva, for his opening statements. Chairman Grijalva, please.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Sablan, and thank you very much for, and thank the governors for their time and for putting this hearing together early on in the session. It's important as the Build Back plan is being put together and priorities are being set. To have this hearing now is very important, and I think particularly in the last 3 years, with your leadership and the leadership of the committee, the issue of the insular areas has grown not only in profile but in some very tangible positive results, and much of the credit, sir, needs to go to you for your leadership on this. The governor of American Samoa said prioritize the issue of healthcare, and he was absolutely correct. And the governor of the Virgin Islands talked about the devastating economic and infrastructure needs that the Virgin Islands have and would translate to the territories, the insular areas in whole. And I agree with that. There's another issue, and as we go forward, creating, I think we within the Build Back Better plan and we within the American Rescue Plan was the idea, the concept of equity and fair treatment and equity for all. And that extends to this discussion today. And I'm very glad we're having it. And the recommendations that the governors are making are very important. We need to do something about SSI. We need to do something about Medicaid. We need to do something for all the territories in that, in order to bring that equity, fairness issue really to light. The other point is that this is the face of American citizens in a region of the world, particularly the Virgin Islands, Marinara Islands, Guam, American Samoa, a face that I think is important for national security, for diplomacy in that region, and the competition in that region, both economically and in other ways. And so I think showing an American face in that region that is prosperous, that is being dealt with equity as American citizens, and are having the resources to take care of their people and to grow their economies and their people, I think is the best diplomacy we can provide for the region as an example of what democracy can do. And one of the ways to do that is to make sure that American citizens in our territories are dealt with as American citizens. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Mr. Vice Chairman, and thank you for the hearing, and my special thanks to the governor for taking time.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Grijalva. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to recognize the full committee ranking member, Congressman Westerman, for his opening statement, please.
Thank you, Chairman Sablon. Good to see you. What is again an early morning for you. It's early for some of us, but nothing like what you're the sacrifice you're making to get up in the middle of the night and do a committee hearing. So thank you. And I know several of the governors on the call are also in some different time zones, and it's not quite like us all being back together in Washington, D.C. having these hearings in person, which I really hope we can do that in the near future. I've had the great opportunity to visit all of the territories, beautiful places with wonderful people, and I look forward to when we can get back to doing committee hearings in person again, and also when we can travel back to the territories to do meetings in person there. Today's hearing is about facilitating infrastructure, promoting cleaner energy in a changing climate. We all want a clean environment, but we must achieve it in ways that enhance our competitiveness and security and keep us from mounting additional federal debt. 3 weeks ago, this committee received testimony on a draft bill that would spend millions of taxpayer dollars to create new grant programs and offices to push the insular areas towards the use of renewables and mitigate effects of climate change. At that hearing, I cautioned against a one-size-fits-all approach. Strengthening existing programs and grants available should come before we see an expansion of government. Congress should be providing tools to the insular areas and allowing each of them to make their own decisions on what energy sources they use or want to develop. We can reduce global emissions more efficiently through innovation and the free market than over-regulating our domestic resources. We should be building off these successes, not trying to shut down more and more of our domestic supplies. We should also be incentivizing using natural climate solutions, much like what I've proposed in the Trillion Trees Act. The Department of the Interior, through the Office of Insular Affairs, distributes approximately $27 million a year for capital improvement grants. The capital improvement programs help address a variety of infrastructure needs in the U.S. territories, including critical infrastructure such as hospitals, schools, wastewater, and waste systems. Improvements to critical infrastructure not only benefit the current population and businesses, but lay the groundwork to attract new investment in the territories, thereby promoting economic development and self-sufficiency. This funding can also be leveraged as local matching funds for other federal grant programs. I do recognize that the current funding level for these infrastructure grant funds and programs may not be sufficient to address all infrastructure needs in each of the territories. Mr. Sablon talked about hospitals and infrastructure as well as others on the conference this morning. In 2017, I was part of a bipartisan congressional delegation that visited several islands in the South Pacific. I remember being quite shocked to see the state of the Lyndon B. Johnson Tropical Medical Center in American Samoa. The estimated needs of that facility are in excess of $100 million just for modernization, and $750 million for a complete replacement. Now, this is the only hospital on American Samoa, and American Samoa has as high a per capita veteran population of any of the states and territories. And the hospital, my understanding is, doesn't come up to the requirements that the VA requires. So we spend a lot of money doing air ambulance to Hawaii every year, and we should be looking at common sense solutions that would invest that money back in infrastructure so that everybody on the island could have a quality hospital to use that would meet VA standards. And lastly, I would add that a focus for today is more federal spending. Before we start pouring more money into the agencies under this committee's jurisdiction, we should hear from the agencies on exactly how they plan to spend the massive amount of American taxpayer dollars and implement the new program from the last omnibus appropriations bill. My hope is that we can work together to address each island's priorities in an efficient way that is beneficial to both the taxpayer and the residents that call the U.S. territories their home. Again, thank the witnesses for being here today, and I look forward to the questioning since we've already heard the testimonies and the continued dialogue. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Yeah, thank you, Congressman Westerman. I just like to take note that while the witnesses were testifying, we had with us Congresswoman Grace Napolitano. She chairs the House Subcommittee on Water Resources and Environment in the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, an important committee under this Build Back Better plan. So thank you. And also, I think will be either as early as next week, we will be having a preview of President Biden's budget. So it gives us a small window looking at where the Build Back Better plan is headed. And so now I will open for questioning, and I will start with myself. My governor first. Thank you, Governor. I must acknowledge that you went on time. You spent less than 5 minutes on your testimony. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
But Governor, thank you very much for your kind words also. But when we talk about sending large amounts of money, federal money to the Northern Marianas and other insular areas, a concern is accountability, sir, making sure the money is used as intended and does not go astray. I have been trying to track the lost wages assistance you were awarded last November. How much were you awarded for lost wages, sir?
I'm not. Yeah, Congressman, thank you for that question. I'm not certain to the exact dollars, but I can definitely get that to you as soon as we can in the morning.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And I understand that money was transferred to the Commonwealth's account. If I have it correct.
Yes.
Okay. And has that program started? Would you know how much of that money has been paid out to unemployed workers in the Marianas?
I'm not exact sure of the exact dollars on that, but I know that we wanted to push hard now that we got the 100% waiver. But we do intend to actually do that before we got the waiver. But having the 100% waiver is definitely help CNOI. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I agree. Thank you. Governor, following today's hearing, each committee member will have the opportunity also to ask some additional questions. Responses are expected to be provided in writing. So can we, sir, get your commitment today that you will provide this committee your answers for the record to these and other questions?
Yes, Congressman. I'll be happy to furnish any of my testimony and my response.
Yes, sir.
So thank you. Of course.
Okay, thank you. So by our account, the Northern Marianas is receiving roughly $750 million from the 6 different COVID-19 relief bills enacted into law so far. And we have received another $750 million from FEMA for disaster recovery since 2018. Yes, and this is a lot of money, well over 5 times our Commonwealth government's annual budget. So we certainly want our people, to have the resources needed to get through the pandemic and the typhoon disasters and to build back better. But it is difficult to see exactly where all this money is going and whether it is being targeted on to your own strategic goals. So could we please get a proper accounting from you of how your administration has distributed these federal assistance dollars to the Commonwealth, and for what specific purposes, and how that spending matches up to your comprehensive economic development strategy? And we would like your answer to be an official part of the hearing record. Could you give us that overview, Governor Torres, please?
Oh, Congressman, thank you for that question. Going over to a lot of the subsections that, and even the amount that you mentioned, there's a lot to address and to cover. Definitely, we have to give you a full accountability, and we're happy to do that, as well as a spending plan moving forward. It's going to take probably a couple weeks to be accurate on some of the infrastructures that we need here. I know that your office also is requesting some additional within the other infrastructure questions and concerns, and we want to address that as much as we can and as accurate as we can. But definitely moving forward, not just the recovery that we needed from Typhoon U2 and Mankut, but definitely the CDBG-DR grant, and now with the ACP. And thank you again for all the hard work you've done.
Thank you, Governor. And I do understand it may take a little bit of time, but we would just appreciate getting that. Governor, look, both you and I, our testimonies agreed that much of the public infrastructure in our Northern Marianas is outdated, inefficient, and in major need of repair or replacement. Your testimony paints a great picture of the current poor state of our infrastructure. So what would you say are our most pressing needs, and how would you prioritize what should get attention and funding first?
Thank you, Congressman. If you look at, you mentioned about our CUC, our power water distribution. Again, we don't have the potable water here. That alone would see our utility is going to cost $800 million. Our airport needs, again, a new runway, a facility. Our hospital, we only have one hospital with built 1986. We have roughly 86 beds. Not to mention, again, this is
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Konst. So if President Biden is going to fulfill this dream, his dream of being the new FDR 2.0, he is going to have to channel a lot more LBJ. Now, all these comparisons to history, they have limits. You don't need to be a Professor Harvey K to understand that both FDR and LBJ had the advantage of large Democratic majorities in Congress, majorities that helped them enact the New Deal and the Great Society. While President Biden is operating with the narrowest possible margin, one vote in the Senate, and the challenge of one vote is that any senator of either party can gum up the works at any time for any reason. At first, the big problem was the right-wing senators, Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, who, truth be told, aren't really with us agenda-wise on most things, whether it is raising the minimum wage or ending the filibuster. That's hard enough. But now, a second front is emerging. Senators who we agree with more than disagree with, threatening to use their power of one vote to drive specific agendas, as Senators Tammy Duckworth and Mazi Hirano did to get more Asian Americans into the administration, in which the Deputy Chief of Staff, Jen O'Malley Dillon, responded with, quote, "We have Kamala Harris." Oof, really? After some frantic consultation with the White House, Duckworth and Hirano backed away today from their threat to block Biden nominations. I'm not disputing her goal, but if every senator operates this way, the Biden administration will rapidly break down and get nothing done, which will make the Republicans very happy. But let me be clear, I put the weight here on President Biden, not on Senators Duckworth and Hirano. It never should have come to this public showdown. Which brings us back to President Biden, FDR, and LBJ. Here's the thing about politics. Politics, like life, often involves choosing whether you are going to do something just because you can, or maybe forego something because even though you can, it would be better for the greater good not to. The fact that a senator can do something is different from whether they will do something. And that is the difference Joe Biden has to work with. Any senator at any time can bring his administration to a screeching halt. But whether they will do that rests largely on whether they will listen to President Joe Biden, whether they respect President Joe Biden, whether they are afraid of President Joe Biden. The thing about LBJ was that he understood this to his long bones. He could encourage, entice, barter, and cajole. And when it came down to it, he could intimidate. In politics, fear is sometimes necessary, sometimes. Emphasis on sometimes. Andrew Cuomo. But Biden does not seem to be invoking much fear or, frankly, respect from his Senate. Even Chuck Schumer smells that Biden will do his own thing, and he's actually giving Schumer cover to go more progressive, knowing well that many of the issues he's now backing won't actually push forward because Biden won't let them. Without some fear to glue things together, Biden will not hold the 50 votes to do the big things he says he wants to do, the big things the country needs him to do. His team leaked out this week that Biden is putting together a $3 trillion economic plan. This plan includes a significant green infrastructure program to curb climate change. No Green New Deal, but it's a green infrastructure program, as well as an investment in people through universal pre-K and free college for at least, the first 2 years. President Biden's team, if it is a team, are already losing the communications high ground. Mitch McConnell has smeared these plans by calling them a Trojan horse for tax increases. Not surprising coming from Mitch, of course, but it is an early warning that we are definitely not going to have a polite debate. These major actions, these vitally needed actions, will only happen if Joe Biden can bring to bear the power of his office and his years of experience in the Senate and his relationships that he brags about in the Senate to line up 50 votes. This is basic. This is basic legislative process. And if there's anybody who should be able to get this done, it is the man who spent most of his life since he was 28 years old in Washington. This is not an intellectual exercise. This is about the use of political power to get something good done for the country, or at least your legacy, Joe Biden, while we are in a crisis. Otherwise, what are you here for? You can't just keep blaming process and the Senate and the crises. You're here to lead. If you're not answering to us, if you're not answering to your legacy, who are you answering to right now, President Biden? Maybe that's the big question. We have a wonderful show today. Helen Hong is here to discuss the rise in attacks against the Asian community and her personal story, which is horrifying. And later, Jordan Zakarin is here to discuss Andrew Cuomo, my favorite topic. But when we come back, we're going to discuss another one of my favorite topics. We have a special debate here, statehood or self-determination for Puerto Rico. It's a spicy debate. You want to stick around for this. All right, welcome back to the Nomiki Show. I am so excited for this conversation, which I think is going to be a debate, and I hope it's a debate. Of course, I'm talking about the hot topic of the moment on our show and many other places. We are talking about the status issue of Puerto Rico, which is a big issue. It's been an issue forever, but it's now coming head to head. Possibly this is the moment, not sure, in Washington with two bills that have been presented. One is advocating for the statehood of Puerto Rico, and the other is advocating for self-determination through a convention. So I'm excited to have two friends. Really, two friends, I'll say that. Luis Dávila is a DNC member. He is a DNC National Committee man, as I've known him through the years. And he is a statehood advocate. And Federico de Jesús is a former Obama-Biden official and the founder of FDJ Solutions. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Nomiki.
All right, I'm going to go all the way in, right? Let's talk about the two bills and what they mean to you. Luis, I'll start with you because I feel like we need to give fair time to the statehood side. Explain the evolution of this statehood bill that is presented before Congress right now.
Okay, so essentially a bill was filed in Congress that would basically offer statehood for Puerto Ricans and for Puerto Rico to ratify the vote that already happened and occurred back in November, where 53% of the voters voted for statehood. I think it's the, Puerto Rico's colonial situation is the unfinished business of American democracy. And I feel as though this bill provides the vehicle that will allow for Puerto Ricans to gain for the very first time that first-class citizenship that we deserve. I think Puerto Ricans deserve a seat at the table, and to the extent that we are not represented and actually have voting power in Congress, and the people who enact the laws that affect all of us who live in the island, that is something that needs to be addressed. And this legislation that was filed in a bipartisan manner, I think it provides for the best opportunity to reach that goal.
What does it mean if this were to happen, if Puerto Rico were to become a state? What would happen next? Would the debt be eliminated? Give us some examples of how this would change.
So that's a great question. I mean, people think that statehood is something that you're just going to turn a switch on and off, and it doesn't work that way. It would have to include a transition plan that would have to address that very same topic, right? The Puerto Rico's debt burden, how it would be managed. Would legislation that currently allows for a process, bankruptcy process in Puerto Rico, how would that continue? And definitely the tax system will need to be changed, and many other federal programs on the island would also change. But I think that's one of the things that need to be addressed, especially by Congress, because at the end of the day, the buck stops there. So it's all decided by Congress under the territorial clause, and that's something that needs to be negotiated and approved as part of the statehood admission process.
While this process would be taking place, would as a state, as all states in the union, I mean, this happened to Louisiana and Hawaii and parts of Alaska, which did not speak English first. Would the island be forced to start legislating and, you know, everything from the courts to the legislature, would it be forced to be pushed into English?
Well, right now, we have two official languages in Puerto Rico by law. It's Spanish and English. We have federal courts operating in Puerto Rico. They already operate in English. Our state courts are mainly operate in Spanish, but they also allow writs to be presented in English. So it's really the language thing. I don't think it's a big impediment. I think we, you know, as a nation in the 21st century, we're certainly, and all the cultures that are mixed in and make a part of what America is, the great melting pot of the world. I think that wouldn't be an impediment to gaining equality through statehood.
Okay, let's move forward on this self-determination bill. There is a bill that was presented by Representative.
You said we should be passionate and interrupt.
Yes, so... yes. But I want you to explain your side, and then. But go ahead.
Let me actually agree with Luis in the sense that yes, Congress owes Puerto Rico those details of a transition plan of what would happen with language, right? Because the fact is that even though there are a lot of Hispanics in New Mexico and California and in other states, those states operate in English. Their state legislatures debate in English. Unlike Puerto Rico, their courts are in English and their school systems are in English and the government operates in English. So if you want equality, shouldn't it be equality for all Americans, not just the people who lived in the potential state of Puerto Rico, number one? And number two, if Congress is going to offer statehood like that bill that he described does, shouldn't that offer include the transition plan so Puerto Ricans know when taxes would kick in, what language requirements there could be? For New Mexico, there were in the Enabling Act. Yes, a sovereign state can have any language that it wants. There's no precedent for that in the US. So Congress needs to tell people what actually statehood means, and then we can make a decision. But just to offer statehood without the transition plan, it's like when Republicans criticized Pelosi when she said, we need to pass the bill and then you'll find out what's in it. So those are my 2 cents.
But Fed, transition plans weren't included in bills for Hawaii and Alaska. So why would you put another bar or set Puerto Rico for another bar? I mean, the transition plans need to be discussed and they need to be addressed by Congress. But I wouldn't detain the admissions bill because it doesn't specify all the different details on how it's going to.
You don't want people to know the details of what their decision entails? Is that what you're saying?
I didn't say that, Fed. All I'm saying is that you shouldn't delay or stop a bill because those, you know, every single detail that you want to know and how it's going to be addressed as part of a transition is not included in the bill. I mean, first the people need to ratify the vote, and then you talk about how the United States is going to incorporate a new state, just as it did back when it admitted Alaska and it admitted Hawaii.
But you said that when they admitted Alaska and Hawaii, there was a transition plan, and Puerto Ricans don't know.
It was a transition plan, but it wasn't on the ballot. You don't have the transition plan on the ballot.
So the alternative here is there is another bill. And this is the bill that Representatives Nidia Velazquez and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, as well as Senator Menendez, put forth last week. So Federico, can you explain what this bill is? And does it have a transition plan?
It does. That's a requirement. And that's one of the reasons that I like the bill. Some people think it's complicated, and that's a fair point, but it has some basic elements for self-determination to be real and meaningful. Number one, it would be involving Congress exactly explaining what each option would mean and leave it up to Puerto Ricans in the politics in the island or pundits like Luis and me to spin our way through this. It should be official. It should be Congress telling us what they would offer, and then we should decide. And it also involves every representative of every option. I know Luis will say, well, people who disagreed with statehood in November in a plebiscite where he correctly stated statehood got 52.5 or 53% of the vote, they actually were voting on a non-binding referendum without knowing what statehood would mean. And therefore to say that all options were represented in the no, it's like saying, well, Trump could have run an election. Trump, yes or no? He would have loved that. A little bit unfair for the Biden folks. So I think self-determination should be inclusive, it should be binding, and it should involve all sides. And that's actually closer to the Biden position, even though he said he preferred statehood. The White House said that another referendum should be held, and it should be a fair one.
Just to be clear, so folks know, when Biden was asked about the position of state, he said, yes, I believe it should be a state, but there should be a fair process where all parties have a stake in the matter. That's his official position. So let's talk about these plebiscites, because there have been many. and they're all non-binding, as Federico says. This last one, while it was 52.8% or 53% of the voters who voted on a ballot, said yes or no to statehood, it was still very low turnout and was not representative of all voters on the island. Luis, I mean, the UN, this is their procedure when they're looking to decolonize territories or kingdoms in the past, for instance. They want to make sure that the vast majority of the citizens, the residents on the island or on a location, are in agreement about an issue. 53% with 30-something% turnout is by no means the vast majority. So how can you go in and use that as the reference point to Congress members who may not be as sophisticated in understanding the dynamics of the island?
The first thing we need to address is the turnout issue. It is constant and uniform with what the last election was as well. Not the last plebiscite, but the last general election, and that's because of a federal court decision ordered the voter rolls, let's call it, to be inflated or to include people that either have been deceased or have moved out of Puerto Rico. The voter rolls haven't been updated in more than 15 years, I think. So
how many of those people are there? I mean, is this like when the Republicans say, dead people are on the ballot, and then you find out it's like one person in all of Wisconsin?
Not on the ballot, but on the registry. So the number that you're using to come up with the 53%, or the number that has been determined to come up with the 53%, or the whatever the rollout, the turnout that you mentioned, it includes people that were registered in the rolls back in, I think it was 2005 or 2006. So there's a lot of people there that have moved out of Puerto Rico that are probably deceased. And they're being used as a denominator when you divide and try to take out the turnout percentage. So the turnout is really higher, and it's really uniform with what has happened before in the last general elections. The reality is that 53%, yes, it's a number that, to me, any politician would dream of winning any election by 6 percentage points. That's a landslide in any election. When you think about it, President Biden was elected as president with 49% of the vote, and he is the president.
Against
and no one is questioning.
Against an actual thing, though. There weren't two ideas. It wasn't like Donald Trump ran against not Donald Trump, as Federico said. And also, that's an election. That's different than, okay, this is my future. This is every single aspect of my life and my history and my blood. And do I have to learn English or not English? Or, I mean, all of these different aspects. This is the UN's, how they configure whether or not.
Has the UN opposed the fact that Great Britain left the European Union? Have they opposed that, or have they said that wasn't? Because that happened with 51%. This is even higher than that one. I mean, elections matter. Elections have consequences.
Yes, but they weren't determining. They were determining whether or not they were leaving an arrangement. The UK was not beholden to the EU. They were tied into many measures, but they weren't a colony, essentially, of the EU. They determine their own laws. There's no fiscal oversight.
I understand that, Nomi, but it was still a self-determination exercise. So, I mean, we're going to talk about what percentage works in one self-determination process and which one is not. I mean, it should be the same bar.
Let me agree with Luis again. I don't really like the whole argument, even though I'm not a statehood proponent. I don't like the turnout argument. I prefer to use the argument that it was exclusive of other options, and it's not Federico de Jesús saying it. It's the U.S. Department of Justice saying it in 2017 when there was a referendum, there was a boycott. And
that was Trump's DOJ. Let's remember that.
Yeah, quoting Obama.
Let's get to that. Okay. All right. We only have a few minutes, but I want to get to this. So speaking of Trump, co-chair for Latinos for Trump presented this. This is your resident commissioner who identifies with the Statehood Party. How do you feel, DNC member Luis Dávila, the Statehood Party that right now is many members on the island today are defending conversion therapies? How do you, DNC member, feel about this party being the major carrier of this mission on the island and on the mainland?
Well, I like that you brought the conversion therapy issue, because that's something that's very hot, a very hot topic down here on the island, and that's the problem that we're having. And Federico will agree with him. The Senate president of Puerto Rico, of the Puerto Rico Senate at the moment, is not a statehooder. He's part of the Popular Democratic Party, and he has already said that they are not likely to approve this law that prohibits conversion therapy. So that's the main issue that we have in Puerto Rico. We're not able to organize politically with left or right leaning views. It's all about the political status, and then sometimes you're stuck in parties that push for a status alternative, which either Federico or I support, but we don't necessarily agree with what people within our own parties advocate for. And I think it's the tragedy of colonialism. So yes, I have a member in my party that caucuses with Republicans, and that's her right. I mean, who am I to tell her not to caucus with Republicans? That she was elected by the people. But the reality is that the statehood bill was introduced by more, not just by her, but also by Democratic members. It's actually a majority of Democrats are the ones that have co-sponsored the bill. So it's really not a Republican measure, but a measure of fairness and equality for all Puerto Ricans.
Fede.
Look, Luis is right again. The bipartisan bill that the stateholders are promoting is bipartisan, and he is right that there aren't left or right politics in Puerto Rico. I opposed the Commonwealth candidate in the last election because he was a homophobe, and he was calling gays sinners, and that's appalling. Mm-hmm. And by the way, the Senate president did vote to ban conversion therapy. He just said he wouldn't opine this time until the vote happens, which I think that he should say that I'm against it, but whatever. But here's the other point. The reality is that most of the people in the NPP, the party that's supporting statehood, there is a chasm, right? Because you can't say you're for equality, but then be a racist. You can't say that you're for equality and then be against banning conversion therapy. And most of that party approved the religious freedom law in the last time. So yeah, it shouldn't be a left or right issue, but there is a chasm between people demanding civil rights and denying them to voters in Puerto Rico or aligning themselves with Trump in the mainland. So that's the contradiction. It's not whether the island politics are left or right. It's a mess. It's not Democrat or Republican. We agree on that. But how can you say you're for equality when you support a party that denies that equality in Puerto Rico? That's the point.
And that's precisely what statehood would eliminate. It would eliminate the political party system as we know it in Puerto Rico, and would bring in the Democratic and Republican Party as the parties who would elect officials to public office. And that then the issue would be resolved, at least in those terms.
But even the governor himself has said that Puerto Rico would be a swing state. So there's no clear determination of whether or not there would be 2 Democratic senators or 2 Republican senators, and how many congressional members as well. So before we wrap, I want to just ask Luis. So this bill that is being presented by Congresswoman Velasquez and AOC, it brings all parties to the table, aside from the plebiscite. If your basis is, we just had this plebiscite, and many plebiscites, by the way, in which statehood has won based on certain terms, then why not just, aside from that, which is controversial and debated, why not just come to the table with this other bill? Because statehood members are included. In fact, some statehood members do support this Velasquez AOC bill. Why not just come to the table and say, let's have a debate out in the open in a democratic way where representatives equally distributed into this convention that they have can really air out every single aspect of this, and may the best team win?
I mean, I think there's room for debate, but I think the bill needs a lot of work. I mean, the bill, first of all, it opens the door for non-territorial options other than statehood independence and free association, which are the only 3 recognized options. So by opening that door, it allows for the process to even become more complicated, and potentially the convention coming up with a proposal that at the end of the day, Congress will not be able to act upon.
But that's what the negotiating commission is for in the bill, so that people know, oh, wait a minute, Congress wouldn't go for that. That's in the bill too.
But the bill says that it allows for any option in addition to independence and others. So it's already saying that it will allow for it. So, I mean, that's just one of the other thing is, at the end of the day, after going through all this process, you end up in a non-binding referendum.
Fede, go ahead.
No, so he wants equality, but not for other options. He wants to limit options. I want people to vote for whatever they want in Congress.
I don't want to limit options. I want to do something that's real and that moves forward. And the problem is when you come up with this, anything goes, at the end of the day, you're going to end up in the same place where you started. I'm 37 already. I don't want to, die and, be, I know this is going to be a year's struggle, but at the end of the day, I mean, I've lived, I've been hearing for the last 25, 30 years of my life, the same thing. And we're always at the same, place. I at least I can admit that, there is at least an effort to do something. But at the end of the day, what you're proposing ends up delaying and we keep up ending in the same place as where we started. So
democracy is listen, it's messy, but it's the best thing that we have. And if it means more democracy, doesn't that, all right. So we only have 2 minutes left. I just want to do a rapid, I'm sorry, guys, we could talk about this for an hour and a half. You should come back on. We'll do the next stage of this. Rapid fire. Last question is, there has been a bill before presented and in Congress. So why didn't it work? Why this time? Why is this time special? Fede.
Well, I mean, there's several bills that have been presented before. I think this time is different for several reasons. This bill that Nidia Velázquez and Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and all other presidential candidates from the Democratic Party, except Amy Klobuchar, support, and 85 other members of Congress, mostly progressive, some Republican. The difference is that bill was the product of advocates, of community organizers in Puerto Rico and in the diaspora in the United States that wanted some change. It wasn't a product of a political party in Puerto Rico who have dominated the debate. And I'm for opening it up for the people. And I think this is the chance that we have. Hopefully, if the White House commits to the thing that they promised the voters and provides leadership, maybe something could happen. And I think that advocates are pushing for it. And I think that's a great thing. And I agree, Luis, this could be improved, and that's what the legislative process is for. The main reason we need self-determination is that Congress has never offered it. It should be binding, it should be inclusive, and it should be fair. And if those elements are in there, I'll be happy to support it.
Luis?
I think there is an impediment for Congress to come up with the options and define them. I think it's their responsibility, and you can come up with a bicameral commission and bring in people from Puerto Rico and even have, whatever election you guys want to have. But I think Congress can really define this. And at the end of the day, one of my main concerns of that bill is the fact that after going through everything about the congressional delegation and the options and whatnot, it still leads to a non-binding plebiscite and non-binding referendum to the people. So, again, it doesn't tie, the results of that whole process is not binding. I mean, so.
As is the plebiscite, by the way, which is your basis.
As is the plebiscite, but the plebiscite was a local law enacted by the Puerto Rico legislature. We're talking about Congress's responsibility, and this is a congressional bill. So a congressional bill should have a, binding clause, and they tried. I mean, I read Section 7 of Velázquez's and AOC's bill, and they tried to make it as binding as possible and to tighten it up as much as possible. But at the end of the day, they can't do it. It can't be binding because if you don't define the options, if you leave it out in the open, there's no way to make it a binding plebiscite or question. So I think at the end of the day, Congress needs to, gather everyone, come up with the options, celebrate as many hearings as possible, and then let the people decide and let's vote directly.
Fede?
No, the bill says that Congress shall approve what the people support, but we can tinker with the details. Congress has never done this. Congress has approved or been close to approving plebiscites that are federal, like Luis says, and they've never gotten to third base. Puerto Rico has also done non-binding plebiscites that haven't resolved anything. Let's try something different. It doesn't have to be this idea, but let's not keep doing the same thing all over again, expecting different results.
Well, back in 2012, I believe, or 2010, the House passed legislation to move a federally sponsored plebiscite. And the only reason it failed was because it failed in the Senate, and the opposition of the statehood opponents, all they did was include the territorial option. Things have changed. I think there is a window there, Fede, to to have, to replicate that same strategy that happened 8 years ago and leave the territory behind.
Well,
Good
these
point
are not
is-
the options in this bill. So yeah.
The thing is things have changed for both of these bills. There's a pathway for both of these bills. I think that's fair enough. I'm really glad you guys came on. Hope to do this again. I would do this regularly. This is so much fun for me. All right. At least they're friends. We're all friends. Federico de Jesus and Luis Dávila, thank you for joining us today. I'm sure we'll have round 2 very soon.
Thank you, Nomiki. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, you guys hear me talking about Sunset Lake CBD all the time. They are a farmer-owned company that ships craft CBD products directly from their farm in Vermont to your door. Sunset Lake CBD has something for everyone. They offer tinctures, I have one right here, gummies, salves, and coffee, and fudge, which is dangerous, designed to help with stress, aches, and pains. It was originally a dairy farm in Vermont, the Ben and Jerry's dairy farm, and they decided to diversify and grow premium hemp. Customers of Sunset Lake CBD, when they are customers, they support sustainable agriculture that enhances rural communities and creates meaningful employment in the community because their minimum wage is, $15 an hour. Kirsten Cinema, do you hear that? And employees own the majority of the company, and they support, through their advertising, shows like our show, the Nomiki Show, the David Pakman Show, and of course, those folks over at the Majority Report. I have my CBD oil right here. It is 3,000 milligrams. I think the last one I had was 800. So I got my Moderna shot yesterday, which some of you guys know. And at first I was like, oh, I feel fine. And then halfway through the show, because I got it in the morning, I started to feel icky, like a little bit of a headache. And then the headache lasted all day. And then in the middle of the night, they warned me that my arm was going to start hurting. And in the middle of the night, I woke up and my arm was in pain and I couldn't sleep on that side. I'm a side sleeper. So I pulled out my CBD and I put it in my water glass and it helped. So the power. And I've tried CBD before. I was like not really into it at first. You can buy it at bodegas in New York and it was like $100. And I'm like, what is everybody talking about? And it didn't impact me. So I just kind of stayed out of that world until I got this care package from Sunset Lake CBD. And I'm not kidding. Like it's changed my sleep pattern. It's really affected my life. Like I'm not taking ibuprofen like everybody said to when you get the vaccine. But Dorsey, I know you are also a big fan of Sunset Lake CBD, and we're not kidding. Like we're like our friends, our family, everybody's buying it.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of it. My partner she's pretty much hooked on it. She can't wait for the new delivery to get here when we run out, which happens a lot because the gummies are kind of like my substitute for ibuprofen or any kind of pain relieving pills and stuff that I just want to avoid. And I love the tincture more than anything, but I'm still out of that one. I messed up on my order and I didn't get the tincture. So I'm still waiting on that, but that's the one that helps me with sleep and with aches and pains. But I love the gummies for more of like, if I have like a little bit of anxiety or I'm just kind of like, I need to chill out a little bit, but I don't want to, smoke any of the herbs that I like to smoke to usually do that. It's the way to go. And like you said, tried stuff before the bodegas in New York that were super expensive and it just like tasted bad. And it's like, it was really expensive, but just like it tasted bad and it didn't do anything, So it's like, well, that's, 2 reasons why I won't get it. And, this was, hearing the ad on Majority Report and using that promo code and getting it, I was hooked immediately. So I hate to say hooked, but it's true. It's like, it's
not like addictive. It's just, for me, like, I don't like being out of control, but I want to wind down. And so, it helps in other ways too, but like, I'll have a glass of wine at night, but then sometimes I just have to get work done. And I want to take that edge off. it's amazing, like, because, you know, when I've done the other stuff, I feel extremely out of control. Like the last time I did the other stuff, I was sitting there in front of Netflix thinking, what is the purpose to life? Why am I even watching this? Why is this important? That is not for me. I'm sorry. I want that like vibe, but I don't want to be questioning my existence on the planet. And then if I drink like 3 glasses of wine, like I can't focus. So this is amazing. It's really shifted my life in so many ways and made me healthier. So I'm very grateful to Sunset Lake CBD, and you should be too. And if you want to order Sunset Lake CBD, we have a promo code. You can get 20% off of your entire order at sunsetlakecbd.com. Use the promo code NOMI, NOMI, and you will get 20% off of your entire order, sunsetlakecbd.com. And remember, they're also just a very ethical business. So you're also supporting, like, you get the discount, but you're also supporting good people who are very passionate about the work that they're doing, and they believe in the values that, you know, the progressive values that we all fight for. So sunsetlakecbd.com. With that, Helen Hong. Oh my God, I'm so happy to see you in your little studio. I have my little studio. You have your, if people could like expand outward and see our studios, they'd be amazed. Whoop, but your sound's off. While you're doing that, I'll do the intro. Helen Hong is the host of Jobsolete podcast and the Go Fact Yourself podcast. She is an actor, comedian, TV host, and news commentator. She's a frequent guest on NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. I love Wait. I like grew up with it, so it's so wonderful hearing you on when you go on. So,
hi, can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
I can show you exactly what's going on in my Zoom room. It's literally my closet. See?
Oh my God, it's
see the hanging part. It's literally my bedroom closet. So
you've got all the foam. So I just added some stuff in my it's not really a garage. It's like a sunroom or something. It's like very old. And I added all of my paintings I haven't hung on the wall that are huge that got damaged, water damaged, but they're helping with the sound because no amount of foam, I'm like covered in foam. No amount of foam helps. You know, like just saw yours.
It's I bought all of this foam off of some random dude on Craigslist, and I need more. I need to hit up the Craigslist guy again. Yeah, I got it for cheap. I mean, it was real sketchy. It was like out of his garage. I was like, maybe I shouldn't be here because I might get murdered. But yeah, the foam helps. But yeah, you need a lot of it. You need a lot of it.
A lot of it. People don't understand. Those Patreon subscribers, those patrons, it's going to foam. And then the other stuff like staff. All right, so let's shift gears for a second, because last week there were these horrific the hate crime. That's my definition. I don't know when the rest of the country is going to catch up. The hate crimes that took place in Atlanta against the Asian community, against women, horrified the country, has opened up a well-needed and overdue conversation about what defines a hate crime, what rhetoric from the former president, Trump, leads to regarding the China virus, you know, and the rise of hate crimes against the Asian community. Yeah. But a few days before, and Dorsey, I think we have this clip of from Now This, you talked about a personal experience in which someone you love and care for was a victim of a hate crime. Can we play that clip real quick? Okay. 1 second, Helen.
I told you to be careful because lately there's a lot of random attacks on old Asian people.
A couple of days ago, I went to Stop and Shop grocery supermarket. Somebody left a cart in the parking lot. So I brought it to the collect area, and just to turn around, this attendant, he pushed one cart about 7 or 8 feet. He threw it to me so fast. When I turn around, I have no chance to avoid it. This cart just crossed over my left toe. And then I came home, I opened the socks. The area is dark. The blood is dead. It hit me so hard.
So this features your story of your father.
Yeah.
Can you give a little bit of background on what happened?
Yeah, it was so crazy. You know, he didn't even tell me that this had happened. I started a YouTube channel with my dad, called Old Korean Dad Stories and sometimes Mom. And you know, mostly we talk about like stories from the Korean War and his past. Like he has all these incredible stories. And so I was doing a video with him about the general attacks. I said, you know, I told you to be careful. There's all these attacks happening. And he's like, then he springs this on me, that this had happened to him. And I was like, wait, you didn't tell me that before. And also, like, did you report it? You know, and he's like, no, you know, I was only mildly injured. And I'm like, what? Like the fact that this guy, he was an employee of that supermarket. He was the guy that collects the carts in the parking lot, was screaming racist obscenities at my father and shoved a cart. Obviously, he was younger than my father. And that's the thing that really gets me. It's that these cowards, they're always younger, you know, they're mostly men. And, you know, often they come up behind the victim. The victim doesn't even know what's happening. They push them, they attack them from behind. It's just so cowardly. And, you know, my dad's approach to it, I think, is the same approach that a lot of elderly first generation immigrants are taking, which is why a lot of these incidents are going severely underreported. They're like, you know,
they're stoic.
They're like, you know, we don't speak English that well. Like, who are we going to tell? Like, I don't even have the language capacity to, you know, describe the incident properly. I don't have the language to like fight back against these people. So I'm just going to suck it up. And for us, the younger generation and the generation that was born and raised here, we're like, no, 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 no. We have to make noise about this. We have to complain about this. We have to speak out against this because this is wrong. It's crazy. You know, that's why, like, my dad never reported it. He didn't even report it to the supermarket management. Like, all of these incidents are going severely underreported. So right now, I think the official numbers are there have been 4,000 attacks. There's way more. I mean, that's not even scratching the surface. And it is because of this past year of Kung flu and the China virus, like our politicians and you know, officials making these, you know, these like jokey, like, yeah, it's the Kung flu, it's the China. It's so irresponsible because these have real world consequences on people like my dad. You know, my dad was the victim of an attack. He, you know, he even says, like, if I had been 3 inches to the left, I might have broken a hip. I mean, that's how hard this guy shoved this cart at me. I could have broken a kneecap. I could have broken a hip, like something way worse could have happened, and it was just dumb luck that only my toe was injured.
And this is in Los Angeles too. I mean, let's
no,
just give this a no.
This
it's
is
not.
in Boston. This is in Boston.
Well, okay, fair enough. I mean, this is in a major city where there's diversity. I mean, I remember a few years ago, it was like this is before we saw in New York a rise of hate crimes against the Jewish community. People literally couldn't understand how they literally thought, okay, well, we're in a city, we're not going to have those attacks because there's diversity everywhere. But it's just wrong. There's a rise in hate crimes all across this country. Everywhere. And the government isn't documenting them because, number one, hate crimes are state by state, how you decide what a hate crime is, and it takes forever. And a lot of these states decided what a hate crime was 20, 35 years ago. You know, in Atlanta in particular, they actually do designate violence against women as a hate crime, but that's not even in the conversation right now. So even though that's the law, it's not even being presented that way, which is mind-blowing to me.
And I'm so glad that you are calling that Atlanta attack a hate crime, because that's exactly what it was. And it's funny that you said, like, you know, the rest of the country will catch up. I feel like the rest of the country realizes that. The only people that are not on board are the officials in Georgia, apparently, are the only people that are like, well, you know. And the thing that infuriated me is how much empathy seems to be given to the assailant, the perpetrator, the criminal who has openly
murderer.
admitted, the murderer who admitted, yeah, I murdered, you know,
He had a bad day though,
8
Helen.
people. I
He
had a bad day.
He had a bad day. He woke up on the wrong side of bed.
I like go eat a freaking tub of Ben and Jerry's like the rest of us do when we have a bad. Go get some potato chips and like snuggle up with Dirty Dancing or whatever movie you need to watch when you're having a bad day. Don't go out and shoot up 3 Asian massage parlors. Like, you're insane. And you know, the thing that I wrote on Twitter, you know, trying to make light of it is like, oh, you know, the officials apparently are accepting his response, which is like, I'm not racist. I mean, my penis might be racist, but I'm not. I'm not. I mean, my junk might be racist, but this was not. Like, give me a break. GTF out of here. You know, like it's so insane. Like, it obviously was a hate crime. Yeah. He obviously targeted these businesses because they were Asian women. So don't try to like finagle his way out of this. Like, this is so obvious to the rest of the world that this was a hate crime. So let's call it what it was.
And the premise of this argument came from that sheriff who has rightfully been removed. I don't know what's suspended, removed, you know, fire the mother effer, who had presented online shirts and swag, quoting
racist paraphernalia.
Yes,
so calling it the, you know, Corona imported from China. And he got, you know, and he even wrote China, like just like the way that the former president says that word. And, you know, and so the rhetoric has real world consequences. And we're obviously seeing that. And I did a piece on Now This warning about this a year ago. 1 full year ago, I did a piece on Now This where I said, you can't call this the China virus. You can't call, like, a virus does not have a nationality. Viruses do not have ethnicity. You know, they're coming for you, whether you want them or not, regardless of race. So, the whole thing is just so irresponsible. And now, you know, I just want to make an appeal to good-hearted people. You know, the people who watch your show, fans of yours, are decent people, you know, I hope, mostly decent people. And, you know, I'm really calling out to a call of action of like, don't sit by. We have to stand up for our brothers and sisters here because, you know, just like the Black Lives Matter took off when everybody became activated and everybody became enraged. And, you know, this has been happening to Black people for hundreds of years in this country, and they're like 20% of the population. Meanwhile, we Asians, we've only been here for about 50 years, and we're only 6% of the population. So we can't do it on our own. You know, I can't, my parents live on the other side of the country. My parents weigh a combined weight of 240 pounds, and I'm not kidding, dripping wet. My parents are tiny people. Like, my mom literally wears a 00. You know what that is, Nomiki?
I've seen it.
It's when 0 is too big for your ass. That's when you go to a size 00. My mom is a 00. This woman is like a willy wisp of a woman. So I can't do that. Like, I'm across the country. I cannot be watching my parents. I cannot be policing our old people. You know, we're just not, there's not enough of us. So my call to action is like, if you see something, say something, like, for real. For real. This is when you have to activate and you know, like, please appeal to the best part of your nature, and you know, offer protection. Keep your eyes peeled. If you see elderly Asian people, if you see Asian women, if you see any Asian person that's by themselves, like, keep an eye on them, because
film the stuff too. Defend them, film it, call people out. We know that police don't always understand. We've heard many in the last several weeks. We've heard many call-ins where people said, you know, I experienced a hate crime or experienced this, you know, a violent attack. There was a woman on NPR a couple of days ago who talked about being attacked at a restaurant, and she called the police and they said, well, what are we supposed to do? She goes, does this happen often? And he says, yeah. So before we wrap, I want to play this clip of Meghan McCain, because if you see something, say something. And this woman has one of the largest audiences in the country. The View is an extremely popular show on a major network, ABC. Let's roll this clip.
excluded women farmers. And so we're going to a place where even if people need money, even if people are qualified to get into Ivy Leagues, race and gender is more important than your skill qualifications, the content of your character. It is not what Martin Luther King Jr. preached. I think this is a very, very slippery slope. I was very surprised to hear someone like Tammy Duckworth say something like this. She got a lot of blowback from a lot of people, not just on the right. And I think this is actually just the natural progression of identity politics. And I will say, just to put a cap on this, The View is 25 years old next year. We've only had one Asian American co-host this show. So does that mean that one of us should be leaving at some point because there's not enough representation? We're talking about, is identity politics more important than qualifications of a job? And I think that's a question going forward that the progressive left is going to have to reconcile.
Okay, and before we go, because we're going to go and take a break, eventually we're going to come back and talk about the black farmer.
Right.
Excluded.
Oh, my God. Okay.
Whoopi Goldberg is all of us. She is literally all of us. Meghan McCain is trash. And I can't believe she's coming out so hard right on the heels, literally a day after she had to apologize publicly for getting called out for calling the coronavirus the China virus and being like, I don't have a problem with it being called the China virus. What's the big deal with the calling us the China virus? Well, bitch, now you see the big deal. People are getting hurt. People are getting murdered because of your freaking big mouth flapping off irresponsibly, being like, I don't know why it's a big deal. We call it the China virus. Like, give me a break.
What kills me though is like there's an aggrievement, right? They're more upset with identity. God forbid minorities or people of color step up and say, we deserve to live. And they're like, well, that's identity politics, or we deserve representation in government so that we have representatives who remind folks that we deserve to live. And she's like aggrieved as a child of a billionaire and a former senator.
Yeah.
Like, God forbid you police my words from a, Are you kidding me?
And the thing that she was saying, which is the argument against affirmative action and the argument against diversity hiring and the argument against so many things, is such a perfect example. Like, if you talk to anybody in any industry, the number one thing that they tell you is it's all about who you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you get that job. It's all about who you know.
Personal experience.
It's got to be about who you know. So, like, if you only know blonde people, only blonde people are getting hired. If you only know white folks, only white folks are getting hired. I mean, people of color have known this for decades. And she's talking about like only the qualified people, like, we need to reach out to the most qualified candidate. It's like, well, how do you get qualification? You get qualification through experience. How do you get experience? You get experience by getting the job. How do you get the job? By knowing someone who looks like you.
Not to mention economic disadvantages. There's we could go through the list of inequities in this country. I mean, the irony of this whole thing, just a side note, she's talking about, we had one Asian person, it was Lisa Ling, who has been very vocal about these attacks, and her husband, Paul Song, who is a Bernie Sanders supporter, as you were too, who've been incredibly vocal about these attacks that have been happening against the Asian community. Like, how dare you speak on behalf of other? How dare you? I mean, I've known her for a long time, okay? We both started in the media together. Look at our trajectories. I'm not a McCain. I am not a person of color, but I'm just trying to say, like, this is not, there are institutional issues, and then layered on top of the institutional issues, there are who you know. I had a conversation recently with somebody, and I'm sure you could refer to this, a white man who was very upset about identity politics and cancel culture. And he said, he explained how he was passed up on a project for a black man got it instead. And I said, oh, okay. So did you ever think that table had 10 people and you were the worst of the 10
worst
guys?
of the whites. You were the worst of the whites. So you know what, buddy? Hit the road. Worst of the whites. Like, my mediocrity was not that's offensive to me, that my mediocre ass did not make the cut. And it's so enraging. And it is something that is very, very, very familiar to people of color. I mean, we talk about this, I'm an actor, and we talk about this in the entertainment industry all the time. It's like, people complain, like, people will be like, well, the Asian actors just aren't up to par.
Oh my God.
Well, how do you get up to par? You get smaller roles, which lead to bigger roles, which lead to starring roles, and that gets you up to par, right? Well, if the beginning roles are only like 2 lines as an Asian massage parlor worker, or 2 lines as a nail salon, because there's, nail salon worker, or 2 lines as the Chinese restaurant waitress. How many roles are there? Right. That's 5 roles in a year. Like, how do you get up to par? The stepping stones for us are not there. You need to actively create the stepping stones for us to get up to par, quote unquote. If an Asian actress has only ever been able to audition to play a Chinese food waitress, right, that, whereas a white actress can play anything. A secretary, a doctor, a nurse, a lawyer, a construction worker. Like, you think there's ever been an Asian construction worker hired in the history of Hollywood? You think there's an Asian dog walker that's ever been hired in the history of Hollywood? An Asian business exec, like a business executive, unless it's a Japanese company. Like, give me a break. Like, the stepping stones are not there for us. So don't even tell me about us not being up to par. There's a systematic, the system is rigged against us.
Yes.
Black people are so familiar with this. Brown people are so familiar with this. Asian people are so familiar with this.
Absolutely. Helen Hong, you are up to par for our show. If we had a little ecosystem, I would be chatting with you all day long. Love you, support you. I hope your parents are doing well.
Thank you.
Folks, call to action.
Watch
out.
Action.
Get your cameras up.
Yeah.
Defend. Be an ally.
Be an ally. And a lot of the things that you can do to help are similar to if you help sexual harassment victims. Like, go stand next to them, be like, hey, come over here, stand next to me, Mary, Sue, whatever. Like, pretend like you're their friend. Just be an ally. Don't just stand by.
Love you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, we will be right back with Jordan Zakarin. We're going to talk about Cuomo, the best topic ever, the topic that never ends, Andrew Cuomo. Be right back. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. Jordan Zakarin, he runs the Progressives Everywhere newsletter. Go check it out. It's incredible. It's one of these amazing. No, I'm not like.
I'm gonna keep going. It's fine.
He's incredible. It's incredible. And he's a regular on our show. I've been waiting to do this conversation with you because we're both New Yorkers, and there's a certain type of New Yorker that's been aware of Andrew Cuomo prior to COVID, and there's a certain type of New Yorker who's just learning about Andrew Cuomo prior to COVID. All right, latest, where we are right now is we have the Assembly, the New York State Assembly, which is in the process of undergoing impeachment proceedings. Could take a very long time, could take many, many, many months. The Speaker of the Assembly, Carl Hastie, just tested positive for COVID. So has Ron Kim, by the way, who broke open the New York nursing home scandal. And we wish the best to both of them. I know that Carl Hastie just received his vaccine too. So be on the lookout, guys. If you get your vaccine, it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to be safe just yet. So I want to start with this Biden clip because, this was from over a week ago at this point, but it's important because so much of this is 3-dimensional, 10-dimensional chess. It's not just about if Andrew Cuomo was to resign or be impeached or all the investigations. It's about where the power lies that's going to hold him accountable. Can we play that clip?
President Biden giving his most extensive comments yet about Andrew Cuomo. The New York governor is currently under investigation by the state's attorney general for multiple credible claims of sexual harassment and misconduct.
If the investigation confirms the claims of the women, should he resign?
Yes, I think he probably end up being prosecuted too.
Meanwhile, new reporting in the New York Times details the lengths the governor and his allies went to discredit Lindsey Boylan, the first accuser to go public. According to the Times, Cuomo's team started circulating an open letter attacking Boylan that they hoped former staff members, specifically women, would sign. No one would.
So this is a big deal. Full disclosure, Lindsey Boylan is a friend of mine, and I support her. And I, of course I believe her, and I believe all of the women who've stepped up with full documentation, by the way. This is very classic Cuomo. I think many people have received the pressure from his staff members or others in the past. And so that might have worked when he was fighting the IDC, when he was complaining to editors about coverage of the IDC and his connection to it, or many other things. This is how it's, but in this case, you see staffers since Lindsey Boylan has stepped up, previous staffers and current staffers, women, say that they too have experienced this. Jordan, this is really important. This is what is catching fire. Simultaneously, there's other investigations going on that are probably more prosecutorial, at least at this point. How are these dynamics? Like, what do you think is like, where the power, how's the power going to flow for this to hold him accountable? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. So like you said, the assembly's doing an investigation, which could, like you said, could take months. They're contracting out the investigation to a law firm that has plenty of New York State political connections. So plenty of conflict of interest already right there. But, Letitia James, the attorney general, who has, obviously she owes her position to Cuomo, but is certainly.
Explain that.
Well, so Andrew Cuomo, you mentioned the IDC.
Obvious to most people.
So Andrew Cuomo, as you mentioned, the IDC, that was a group of breakaway Democrats who were kind of Democrats because you have to be in New York. They decided that they would team up with Republicans to give them the control of the state Senate. That was through most of 2013 to 2018, and just stopped so much progress and allowed Cuomo to just be, whatever he wanted to happen would happen. Whatever he didn't want, he could squash without, seeming like a bad governor. You say, well, we can't pass it in the state Senate. And basically in 2018, a lot of real Democrats, progressives, ran with the help of the Working Families Party to beat those members of the IDC. And Letitia James, who was like a, real long time Working Family Member Party and endorsee, she wanted to run for attorney general. And Cuomo said, I will support you, which is, kind of like a, kingmaker type deal, if you reject the endorsement of the Working Families Party. Because Cuomo really hated the Working Families Party because they were supporting Cynthia Nixon, who was primarying him. She said, all right, she made that deal with the literal devil. And she accepted his endorsement, said no to the Working Families Party, and won. Now she's in the position where she has to investigate Cuomo. And, to be fair to her, she took the deal
Don't love that, but to be fair to her, she was the person who broke open the nursing home scandal once, her office investigated that after Ron Kim, who you mentioned before, hopefully he's okay, he says COVID, for months and months and months, nearly a year, was talking about how it was clear that Cuomo administration was just covering up, I don't know, like 10,000 deaths from nursing homes, blaming it, saying it doesn't deal with COVID. So Letitia James is one of two people now one of two groups doing investigations into Cuomo. The wide-ranging one for the assembly, they have they can investigate a whole lot. They've been allowed to the nursing home scandal, the covering up problems with the bridge that bears his father's name, the Mario Cuomo Bridge.
Yeah. This has been going on for a while.
Yeah,
Just
sexual
crazy.
harassment.
It's not safe.
Yeah.
It's like, don't take the Mario Cuomo Bridge, guys. Just don't do it.
You think that the one named after his dad, he'd probably want to make sure it's safe and not seem
Details, buddy. Details.
Right. And so they're investigating that, and that can take months. And people see that as buying time for Cuomo to, I guess, wait out the outrage. Letitia James is investigating just the sexual harassment claims. Although I imagine she gets busier and busier every day because more and more people seem to be coming out saying, yeah, Governor Cuomo groped me, said weird stuff to me, unhooked my bra, just all these terrible accusations that obviously people in his office investigate are saying that it happened. People who are working for him. I don't know what more proof you need. You don't say about your current boss, who is the governor of New York, that he sexually harassed me. There's very little upside to doing that if it is not true, and even if it is true, it's puts you out on a limb forever. And so, it's one of those things where it's going to take. I can't imagine that if Cuomo is going to be forced to resign or to be impeached, this assembly investigation, I can't imagine is going to be the thing that makes it happen, because that's going to take so long. And so I would imagine it's going to be Letitia James and her investigation, or just more and more people coming out and saying these things about Cuomo to, force the hand of the state assembly, which is still, controlled by Democrats who are, I guess they owe something to Cuomo, or they, So,
well, not to mention there's the right wing, which has pushed for investigations. You have the Albany police saying that something criminal may have happened. They're going to investigate. And I think this is why Biden, I believe in my heart that Biden may have had a Biden gaffe in this interview, where he said he'll probably be prosecuted because the feds are involved as well, the Department of Justice. He is being investigated from every single level. But to be fair, Andrew Cuomo is the king of investigations. He has survived. His staff hasn't.
He buried them. He keeps burying them.
I mean, his best friend, his second brother, Joe Percoco, that's what he called him, is in jail right now because of a Moreland Commission play scandal that existed, with the Buffalo $1 billion sent to Buffalo, where I grew up, and basically went into the pockets of different folks. And there's a few people in jail now. So, I mean, this is a very classic Cuomo. It's not that complicated. It's just not sexy. And I think this is the thing, the nursing home scandal, where it definitely hit a nerve with so many people. It really went over, simultaneously with the sexual harassment and assault scandal, and Tish James, his own party member and loyal person, that kind of cracked it open. So he's being attacked from both sides. He's done deals with Republicans, but now the Republicans are going after him. He's done deals with the left, but they always go after him. So he's getting isolated. He's being attacked from all different fronts, which I think is different, than the Moreland Commission, where nobody understood it. It was corruption. Corruption's not sexy. And his approval ratings would go down. And that's ultimately, I've talked to a lot of different politicians, current governors, former governors. What is it that really will make or break? And they always say, if his approval rating dips below 30%. I don't know why 30%.
Why? God,
I don't know why.
Absolutely hated. He's got to be reviled by 75% of the country.
Maybe there's some factor, whatever. This is beyond me, right? But this is what 35% is what everybody keeps saying. His approval ratings dropped astronomically within 4 or 5 days. He went from, I'm going to be off a little bit, 43% saying he should stay in office to 33% he should stay in office. Those aren't approval ratings, but they're similar. Right. So if you're Andrew Cuomo, who's a master chess player, right? Really, he is, I'll give credit where credit's due, the best in the business. Seriously. Mm-hmm. He has an Achilles here. It's a heel. It's fear. instilling fear in others and anger and, all the things that he does. But if you're Andrew Cuomo, you want this process to delay through the assembly, who's currently going through impeachment proceedings and investigations. You want the budget to go through, which we're now in the midst of. He's presenting his budget and it's a tense time in Albany. And you want to use that to barter your security, at least to finish out a term. No?
Yeah, I mean, think about how much money, the American Rescue Plan, the stimulus is going to provide New York State, right? All these legislators have these projects and that they desperately need to get done. I think what I just saw was that they came to some agreement on marijuana legalization after Cuomo kind of dragged his heels on that for years. So, I mean, maybe that's part of it. He's kind of, like you said, using as bartering points, because there's so much to get done, whether it's opening schools, whether it is, distributing so much money that's going to come through the American Rescue Plan. All these legislators wanted to go to their home districts and say, look what I got, look at these projects, money for funding for this thing, all these benefits that we got, we can now make testing and we can get vaccines out faster. So I think that, he is trying to use that, like you said, as sort of the way to get people, maybe not on the side, but to back off a little bit. But budget has to be in apparently by April 1st. That never really happens. I don't due dates don't really matter, I don't think.
Although he's a big fan of saying, I get it on time.
Albany, but right, yeah. I think he's gonna have a little bit harder time getting people to, no, absolutely, nobody cares. He's gonna have a little harder time, I think, getting people to agree to those things. Alessandro Biaggi is already sending emails and ringing the bell and making, big demands, which obviously she should. She took down one of his big allies in the IDC.
And she's
so,
also a former staffer. She was not staffer. She was an appointed person in his administration, Alessandra Biaggi, who's a senator.
Yeah, I mean, she's part of the women's working group, right? The sexual harassment working group in Albany, who, this is a big problem too. This is not just Cuomo being a creep. This is a huge problem throughout all of, Shelley Silver, the former, assembly leader, he, a speaker of the assembly, he had a bunch of a lawyer who was a huge creep that ended up being, sexually assaulting people. There's Alessandra Biaggi, who was part of the sexual harassment working group. There's so many people in Albany, or women who've worked in Albany, who have said, this is a real problem and this is a real cesspool. And Cuomo was the king of the cesspool, and
there was that line, what happens past Bear Mountain stays past Bear Mountain. Bear Mountain is like the marker of like, you're getting closer to Albany, things stay in. And, it is, listen, I don't know enough about it. Andrew Cuomo, yes, he's the king of the cesspool now. He wasn't 10 years ago. 10 years ago, this was the norm. I mean, I guess the ground has shifted so much because of, start with Alan Hevesy, who went to jail. There's the former comptroller of the state. You had Shelley Silver, who's in office for 20, or I don't know, much longer than that, but he was the Speaker of the Assembly for 20 something years. You had the leader of the Senate, who Dean Scalos, who also went to jail, all in the same time period. Malcolm Smith went to jail. Many state senators, many assembly members. There was such a shift, a drastic and quick shift with people who've been in power for decades. And it happened because of sex scandals, because of bribery, because of pay-to-play scandals, because of kickbacks, because of so many different issues. And so the foundation has shifted so much in Albany. And Andrew Cuomo has been able to survive that because it kind of came out after that, those crises, at least as governor. But simultaneously, you have progressives like Jabari Brisport and Julia Salazar and Jessica Ramos. I mean, all of these people who've come in post IDC have really shifted the conversation. So the power dynamics are shifting. I mean, it's good, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was used to be the three men in the room, smoke-filled rooms, right, in Albany. It used to be like whatever they decide gets, we'll get introduced and we'll pass, and it'll be the budget, and that'll be that. And now all of a sudden, power is more diffuse because why are these people? There's so many lawmakers who don't owe their careers to these, men smoking cigars in rooms in Albany. And so that's such a big deal because they're not just going to be loyal foot soldiers. They are going to vote their conscience and go, for their own communities. And so I think that we look back at beating the IDC in 2018, that was to try and get some legislation passed, right? For so many things that needed to happen. But the fact that is that I think it changed the entire paradigm of what's happening in Albany. I just wish that Jumaane Williams had beaten Kathy Hochul, the lieutenant governor. I think he lost by like 3 points in 2018. I'm much more excited. I want Cuomo to be gone. Be much more excited for him to leave if Jumaane Williams was taking over as
we can differ on that. He's my former opponent.
Well, what I'm saying is that Kathy Hochul is more
Kathy
Cuomo.
Hochul.
Yeah.
Yes, but Kathy Hochul, I'm they're both of them are imperfect.
Yeah. Oh no, I mean.
Oh, we're cutting out.
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is that like there's a bit of
Yeah, you're
in the sense that like I want like new blood in Albany. Oh, sorry. Am I good?
Yes, but we need new blood that also respects women, also respects the budget prices, doesn't take real estate money. Like you got to be a real progressive, not somebody.
I will defer to you on that, and so I will say that I want who. Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
Assuming Cuomo's gone, he's not going to run for election. Let's assume that. Who is your ideal candidate to run?
Well, first off, Kathy Hochul will be if he has to step down. Kathy Hochul inherits the seat, and yes, she was brought in by Andrew Cuomo from Buffalo. I was actually raised in her district, so very familiar with the dynamics there. I mean, I think we need somebody who's bold and has a real vision and has real experience and is not tethered to the real estate industry, is not tethered to and I mean, truly tethered. I mean, the thing is that there's a real track record here. There's money you can follow. There are people who say, I don't take it now, and they still do. Perfect. Somebody who is willing to shake things up and reform the systems and understands like what democracy, like shifting the democracy of the state, because fundamentally, the Democratic Party is an institution in New York that is basically just it's Cuomo's institution. There is no Democratic Party in New York, but there are other parties in New York that are pushing the levers. We have to reform those parties too, so that they're more democratic. And so, if we really want to change the way this ecosystem works, we actually have to change the power that backs them and make sure that they're actually progressive, that they're not supporting candidates to take real estate money, that they're not supporting candidates who sided with the police back rooms, who haven't rezoned their neighborhoods, and not just progressives in name only. I mean, you can show up to a protest and take photos when everybody's shown up, but are you still taking the money from the people you're protesting?
Right.
That's what I want to see. I love Cynthia Nixon. I assume she's not running again, but it would be wonderful to see somebody who's. I mean, I'm not opposed to Tish James. I think she's doing an extraordinary job as Attorney General. Surprisingly so. I did not back her. I backed Zephyr Teachout, but I will give her credit. She took on the NRA, and my God, like that is the most powerful move anybody has taken against the NRA ever. So I don't know. Who do you think?
It's tough for me to say. I don't think I know. Obviously, I don't know people there as much as you. But I think what I would love to see is, like you said, someone who. I mean, you mentioned parties that even the smaller parties need to be reformed. I remember the Working Families Party. Who I support. They also backed Joe Crowley over AOC. There's all these vested interests that have to be severed, right? And so, I mean, I defer to you and who would be the right candidate.
Don't defer to me. Everybody's got a right to their opinion. Yeah.
I think for me, it's just, I just want to see someone who hasn't maybe been around forever, who hasn't lived in that, I don't want to use the word swamp because it's a Trumpian word, but who hasn't, made all those deals already. And so I think that for me, like you need, I guess, in Albany to be able to navigate Albany, experience and understanding of how the system works, but someone who hasn't been there so long that they, already are part of the institution there. So,
or who've defied them too.
New face. I mean, Cynthia Nixon sure didn't have. Yeah.
Cynthia Nixon, if folks don't think their whole thing on her was she was an experience, she crushed him in the debate. I was there in person, and it was one of the most powerful experiences seeing somebody who they kept saying is not smart enough, is not this, she's an actress, blah, blah, very sexist, condescending stuff. Sure. And meanwhile, she crushed him in the debate. She really crushed him in the debate. So I think it's a great conversation. We have a lot of time from now until then. Maybe some other folks will come up and stand out and defy, even if they came from the institutions, right?
Right.
To be able to defy them. That's power. What Ron Kim did actually, because he hasn't always been fully progressive, but he's really transformed his position in power. And I give him a lot of credit. Like it takes a lot to say, no, thank you.
And he's been doing that, even when Cuomo was at his most powerful last year. It wasn't like he started doing this, when Tish James investigation came out.
Right.
And Ron Kim was doing it like last February. He has been relentless in this. And so I think like something like that, I really like Alessandra Biaggi. I think, she's powerful. She's effective. She's, she's like my age, but she's like incredible leader,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be governor, but it's incredible to see. Like, I think, and she, like you said, was like working in Cuomo's Albany. So she has like every motivation to avenge that in a way. So like, someone like her, Ron Kim, I think there's a lot of great
Jessica
voices
Ramos.
Yeah. Jessica Ramos is really great as well.
Union, really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if Andrew Yang's our mayor.
Yeah, that is
another conversation next time. Jordan Zakarin, thank you for this has been a whole show of just like, let's get it out. Looking forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for the Cuomo conversation. Always a blast.
I'm always happy to dump on him.
All right, we'll see you next week, Jordan.
All righty, sounds good.
Let's give you guys some shout outs. We have, have you guys liked and subscribed already? If you haven't, this is the time to do it. Go subscribe. Seriously, like this is the moment. We're post-Trump era. Media is kind of like, reestablishing itself. So we need that foundation. It's really important. We're an independent show, as you guys know. We don't take we're not part of the corporate infrastructure. So it's important that these likes and subscribes and shares are really important. So, all right, Difficult Truth thank you so much, is giving out a tier 1 community sub gift. Oh, he gave one out yesterday. Thank you, A Difficult Truth. That's so sweet. Schultzy 100 says, hello, Nomiki Show. Persuading Biden to do stuff now is going to be way harder than I imagined. His brain, sometimes he sounds like Ben Carson. I'm beyond concerned. I don't think it's more about the Biden administration. Let's just say that. He has to take pressure. He's the president of the United States. And so does Chuck Schumer, by the way. Professor Harvey K, thank you so much for mixing it up in the live chats. We see you. We hear you. I chatted during the Puerto Rico segment. I sent something over to you. I hope you get a chance to go back and watch the opening because we gave you a shout out. JKR Dozer, thanks for the love. And Kowalski from Nebraska says, get some foam, coffee, CBD, or whatever you need. I'm over my coffee today, but that'll pay for tomorrow's coffee. Thank you. Big thank you to Mitty Ducks and Mario for working those algorithms today. It was a busy day. And huge thank you to our moderators, Bob C., Chokin, and the Orb, and Chuck Diesel, and Dorian Sapiens, A Difficult Truth, Nightbot, Our Means, Nug Wrangler, all you guys over at Twitch. Thank you very, very much. And remember, once we hit that sub level, I'm going to play a game on Twitch. That's what's going to happen. I'm going to play a game. All right, guys, we will see you tomorrow. Same time, same place, 3 p.m. Eastern. Stay in solidarity.